Pearl, the Soul of the World by Meredith Ann Pierce, Chapter 5, Aeriel. Her name was Aeriel. She remembered now. Born in Purs, heir to the suzerain there, then sold into slavery after her father's overthrow, and she remembered the dark angel swooping down on his dozen black pinions to carry her away. Avarick's white plain, where Icarus now wings. The words ran through her mind like an incantation. She recalled the wedding sari she had donned in marriage to the dark angel, how to dissolve the evil enchantment upon him. She had surprised him with a magic cup made from the hoof of a dead star horse. Then strong hoof of a star horse must hallow him unguessed, if adamant's edge is to plunder his breast. Using the keen edge of an unbreakable blade, she had extracted the dark angel's leaden heart and given him her own to make him mortal again. Once free of the witch's spell, Prince Irelanth had turned to horror against his former mistress and begun raising an army to destroy her. Then only may the war horse and warrior arise to rally the war hosts and thunder the skies. Aeriel, meanwhile, had traveled half the nations of Westernice to rescue the lost lawns, once guardians of the world, who had been turned into gargoyles by the witch. For without these powerful allies, Aeriel knew, her husband's burgeoning war host had little hope of victory. "What befell you then?" the Dark Lady said, "once you had rescued my lawns at Orm, and stood in the temple flame, and burned your shadow away?" Aeriel could not see her questioner. The ancient's voice seemed to come from the air. She felt as though she were floating, suspended in nothing. She heard another voice as well, murmuring, telling everything, and realized presently it was her own. Images of whatever she remembered and spoke aloud swirled before her in the darkness in little running beads of fire. "After Orm, we departed for Isterness," she murmured. "Where the great conclave was held," Aeriel nodded. "Yes." The pictures of fire strung themselves before her on the darkened air. "But first, the women of learning and the magic men brought forth the star horse." "Who had been dead," the other prompted. "Who had been killed years ago by the dark angel. The priestesses said they could rebuild the horse," Aeriel replied. "Call back his wandering soul and revive him in new flesh, the very image of the old, with memory of his former life and death." "Did they succeed?" the ancient persisted. "Tell me." "Oh, yes," Aeriel breathed, the memory scene unfolding before her, clear as though it were this very moment happening. She nodded. "The star horse, yes. I remember him." The crowd had stood flocked in the great square before the Eastern Palace, all the people with their plum-colored skin, the women in their turbans and flowering trousers, the men in their long gowns, heads veiled against the white slant morning light of Solstar. Silva, the lady of Isterness, stood foremost, flanked upon one side by Irelath, her son. Aeriel stood beside him. Craning eagerly, Irelath's half-brothers, the lady's younger sons, stood opposite. A glimpse, a murmur from the throng, and the priestess led forth the star horse. Aeriel's heart leapt at the beauty of him, Averclon, the guardian of Avarick. She felt her husband shiver hard, though with delight or terror at the sight she could not tell. Irelath no longer shunned her as he had for the first year of their marriage, nor did he shrink from her now, but he seemed in awe of her since. Orm, she suspected, had found her presence troubling, even painful. Why? The question needled her, and she had no clue. Always he treated her more as some distant valued ally than as his wife, or even a friend. An overwhelming sense of failure aided her, for Irelanth was her husband only in name. Overcome by longing, Aeriel pressed nearer to him, using the crush of the crowd as an excuse. He appeared oblivious to her, his gaze directed toward the star horse, who came forth from the temple all silver fire. Those hooves, striking the paving stones, were throwing white sparks. Great wings, the pair that sprang from the horse's withers, arched, flexing and beat the air, while his little wings, those that dressed his fetlocks and adorned his cheeks, fluttered. He tossed his tail, he pranced, and one hoof shone brighter than the rest, dazzling in the light of Solstar. Aeriel sensed Irelath beside her growing taut, his breath quickening. She felt his back arch, his own shoulders flex as Averclon's pinions beat. Was he remembering his own wings, a dozen of them, that he had worn as a dark angel? Now it was Ariel who shivered. Her husband had ceased to be the powerful winged creature, not by his own choice, but by hers. What must it be like, she wondered, to have lost such wings? Aberclon tossed his head, his brow horn cutting the air, his nostrils flared, and he whinnied a long trumpeting call. "By Ravenna, who first made me," he cried, shaking himself. "It is a fine match, a new body, as like my old could be. You have done well, priests and wise women, in building this new engine for my soul. I thank you. It is good to be in the world again." His eyes, like bright meteors, scanned the crowd. "Companions," he called to his fellow guardians, the lawns, "you who were with me at our first making, I greet you. That you are all assembled can mean but one thing, that you have been rescued from the witch's power as I was from death, and the war against her is on." The great lawn Penderlawn roared in answer. "Yes, you have it, friend." The Star Horse turned his head and gazed upon the Lady of Isterness. She went to him. "Ah, lady," he said. "King's wife and Avaric, I rejoice to see you again. What is this place?" "It is my land," the Lady Silver replied. "That you would call Easterness. Once wife to the late King of Avaric, yes, I was, but no more. I am returned again to my own dominion." The Star Horse bowed his head. "I remember now. I saw your train departing after the death of your son." "You mistake," Sylvia replied. "He did not die." Ariel could not see her face, but from her voice she knew the lady must be smiling, as though she told of joyous things. Irelath caught his breath in through his teeth. Ariel saw only the side of his face, gone tense and pale. "He became the witch's prisoner," the lady continued, undismayed, without a trace of shame, "and she made him into a dark angel." "A dark angel!" the Aberclon exclaimed, snorting and half-rearing. "The Irelath that used to sit laughing on my back and dig at me with his heels for spite and pull my hair." Sylvia nodded. "But he has been rescued by her who rescued both you and the gargoyles. He is mortal again and stands at hand." She turned to her son as she said it, and the Equestal, following the line of her sight, cast his silver eyes upon the prince, who flinched beneath that cool and level gaze. Ariel no longer felt him breathe. The Star Horse whickered darkly low. "You might be," he said at last. "That was my Irelath. Are you also he that put me out of Avaric?" Ariel felt her husband shudder. He nodded slowly. "How came you by those scars upon your cheek?" said Aberclon. "You were fair to look at once." She felt him draw a ragged breath. Without thinking, she started to take his hand. But then she did think and did not dare. She heard a rumble from the lion of the desert beside her. The prince's glance flickered that way for an instant. Passing over her without a thought, he turned back to the Equestral. "Penderlawn," he whispered. The lawn of Avaric turned his head and eyed the young man sidling. "I died a hard death in exile because of you," he said. "I loved you once." Irelath sank down, and Ariel feared at first he must be faint or failing, but then she realized he was kneeling before the Equestral. "Aberclon," he said, "so much has befallen since I was young and rode your back and pulled your hair. I hardly know whether I can love you or anyone ever again. But I remember loving you before the White Witch had me and made me what I was. Of all the wrong I did while in that shape, I swear it was killing you that was the worst. I did not know you then or know myself, but I face you now and know you. I no longer serve the witch. The wedding toast I drank from your hoof has freed me of her enchantment. I have sworn to overthrow her now, to cast down and unmake her and all her dark angels, but I need a steed. Each of your fellow lawns has accepted one of my brothers as a rider, but now no mount remains for me. Will you aid me? I beg you. Let me ride you again as once we rode. Be my ally for a day-month, a year, and at the end of this war I shall be yours, to do with as you will." Ariel paled, staring at the prince. A kind of roaring filled her ears. At the end of this war she had had such hopes that Irelath might consent to be hers at last, her own true husband, her love. A bitter taste came into her mouth. Her balance swayed. "Irelath! Irelath!" She wanted to cry, but Irileth had forgotten her. Shaken, she said nothing, eyeing the kneeling prince of Avaric. He had bowed his head. The star horse was coming forward to touch his nose to the young man's brow. "A truce, then," said the lawn very softly. "As you wish, until the witch be overthrown. Then make no mistake, I will have my due, but no matter. We will not think of that now. Come, take the air with me, king's son of Avaric. Let me see if you still remember how to ride." Irileth looked up. Ariel heard his indrawn breath and saw a joy almost too strong to bear break over his face. He leapt up, catching the star horse's mane. The silver steed danced back, his great wings stroking, as if to tease the prince. Then he turned, and in a bound, Irileth was astride him. With a mighty leap, the star horse launched himself and sped away upon the air, circling and climbing above the square, and the crowd cried out, craning to see. Few had heard what had passed between the star horse and the prince. Ariel knew. Perhaps she alone had heard, and only she could not rejoice. She watched her husband soaring overhead, horse and rider swooping and diving together in dizzying arcs. She could see the prince's face, even at this distance, suffused with rapture still. Was it the wind, the sensation of flight, she wondered, or having won an old friend's forgiveness, if only for a while, or that he and his brothers might now ride against the witch with some hope of success? Ariel knew that once more he had turned away from her. She felt one hot tear spill before dashing the others angrily aside. She refused to weep openly here under public gaze. A hand slipped quietly into hers. Startled, she turned. Her friend Erin stood beside her, a tall, spare girl with skin black as night. Her eyes, like jet, found Ariel's. The dark girl pressed her hand. Of all this great sprawling throng, Ariel realized, only Erin was not watching the prince and his steed wheeling and tumbling overhead. Only Erin had eyes for Ariel, and we will pause there.